views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
All right, welcome to today's verdict. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesch. We had two very interesting guests this show. You're going to meet them. Andrew Rigie, he's been on before. He's from the Hospitality Alliance. He's going to talk all about the Omicron virus, how it's been affecting the restaurant industry, and what he's been doing or suggesting we should be doing to protect the restaurants who are now, unfortunately, losing business. Next up, we have the Vanilla Vigilante. That's his nickname. It's an attorney, Spencer Sheehan. He takes on a lot of these manufacturers, companies with respect to false and deceptive advertising. I've been wanting to meet him for a while, and he gave us a great interview. As you can see, we have a lot to get to, so stay tuned. Today's verdict starts right now. All right, welcome back to today's verdict. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesch. We have returning with us one of our favorite guests, Andrew Rigie, the executive director at the New York City Hospitality Alliance. Andrew, how are you doing today?
Oh, hanging in there. Hope you are as well.
You know, I joke around a little bit with you, when we off air, that we've been doing this, you and I, from the very beginning of the pandemic. And we've certainly been talking about the restaurant industry for months, more than a year now. Let's get right to the Omicron variant. What's happening with the restaurant industry and how is it being affected?
Well, it's been devastating. It's another gut punch. We've been talking about these issues for so long right now. We were really thinking we were heading in a much better direction going into the holiday season. Back in November, international tourism opened up. More and more people were vaccinated. You'd walk around. There was just a different vibe and energy in the air, and certainly happening inside of our city's restaurants and bars. And then all of a sudden, we heard about this new variant, and boom, it hit hard. Restaurants and bars and clubs were seeing all their corporate holiday parties being canceled, one after another, and it just snowballed. Then we started seeing individuals cancel their reservations, and there was just a lot of confusion and fear and uncertainty. And once again, our city's hospitality industry is square right in the middle of all of these challenges being impacted, especially when they thought we were heading in a much better direction, especially compared to where we were last winter.
And a lot of my friends, I happen not to be traveling, but most people had to travel. They needed to get tests to allow them to get on the planes. So they were afraid, to even possibly get sick, because then they would miss their flight and then they would have to cancel the vacation. So it was the timing of it was was so bad. And I'm not saying, the Omicron virus isn't something to worry about, but I just don't know if it's as strong as the Delta variant. So at some point, I'm just wondering, are these restaurants going to get, filled up again? And I'm talking indoors, not necessarily outdoors. What do you think about that?
Yeah, listen, I think almost 2 years into this pandemic now, where we are, particularly with this new variant, we have to balance all of these different risks, but life has to go on. Thankfully, although it appears this variant is much more contagious, it seems to also be less severe, particularly for people who are vaccinated and boosted. And the hospitals, while they're increasing hospitalizations, is not close to where we were with Delta or the other variants. So amongst all the doom and gloom, I think that there's many people that also realize, you know what, life has to go on. I need to take the proper precautions, but I'm still going to eat out. And listen, restaurants are struggling because holidays are usually where they generate a lot of their revenue and historically made their money. This year, they're hoping just to make some money to pay off some debt, but at least we were moving forward instead of backwards. This hit, all these reservations canceled, and it hit them. But people still do want to be out. So you do see people eating outdoors, but you see people eating indoors as well. And hopefully, early in the new year, we'll see these cases decline and we'll get back to where we were before. But we have to balance risk we have to move forward. Of course, we need to be safe and smart, but we need to do this while supporting our local restaurants and our bars because they mean so much to New York City and the recovery in New York City.
You know, I happen to love this restaurant, Caravaggio. It's very close to my apartment. It's got an outdoor seating and indoor. And listen, it's nice to have the outdoor option. I'm used to it now. So I guess what I'm asking, do you think this is here to stay, or is this something that's going to go by the wayside maybe in 6 months to a year?
No, outdoor dining has transformed the city streetscape. People love it just by walking down the street, seeing how many people are dining outdoors, and even the willingness to do it out in the cold. So we're working with the city. We'll have to work with the mayor-elect Adams in the new year, as well as the new city council, on developing the permanent program, which has to be more standardized, more sustainable than what we see in the temporary emergency program we're still operating in. You know, this was an evolution of a program that was stood up quickly in a crisis. It evolved as it got cold, then it got warm, then it got cold again. They were changing rules and regulations. So the program is here to stay as outdoor dining, but the specifics about what the structures will or won't look like, the permit and licensing process needs to be standardized, sustainable for the long term. But I think outdoor dining is here to stay in an important capacity.
You know, we had every candidate for mayor on this program, and we asked them straight out about the small businesses and what you would do to increase productivity and make sure that they can stay in business. And now we have a new mayor, and Eric Adams is there. What are your thoughts in terms of what he may be able to bring to the table to keep this resurgence, well, hopefully it's a resurgence, out in the open?
Well, listen, there's a lot, you know, some of it is going to be, or a lot of it may be dictated on what happens with the pandemic and how we respond to it. But we can't just be playing defense. The Adams administration is going to have to play offense as well. And I was honored to be appointed to the mayor-elect's transition team and have been working with a whole bunch of different colleagues on different policies that they can enact. And they include things like outdoor dining, because we know how that supports small business. How are we a promoter of New York City? You know, the great thing about New York City, we're the restaurant capital of the world, the city that never sleeps with all this nightlife. But we're going to have to continually remind people, not just locally, but from around the country, around the globe, to come here to New York City, to visit our cultural institutions, eat at our restaurants, drink at our bars, go experience our nightlife. And that's going to be a big factor. Obviously, keeping people safe, keeping the streets clean. These are all things that are going to project a way of life and the recovery or lack thereof of the city of New York. So I think he's going to have to work closely with leaders in the industry like myself and others, as well as with the city council, on making sure that our small businesses and our restaurants and bars and nightlife have policies in place that support them. You know, we've been saying bring back the propane heaters, which Mayor-elect Adams is in support of, so people can sit more comfortably warm outdoors if they're not comfortable dining indoors, particularly during this COVID increase. We could convert sales tax collection into grants for local restaurants because they have that money on hand. Small businesses need cash flow so they can pay their employees. They can hopefully, purchase the propane tanks that he'll allow. And we need to think creatively. We need to promote the city because we know at the end of the day, New York City doesn't recover for the long term if our restaurants and nightlife and cultural spots are not at the core of that recovery.
You know, the viewers would love to hear about your 10-point program. I want to talk a little bit about that. First, just to introduce to the viewers what this 10-point program is, if you could.
Sure. Throughout the pandemic and even pre-pandemic, what we wanted to do representing the city's hospitality industry is not just say we need to support our restaurants, support our nightlife, but give concrete ideas of what will help. So we just recently put out a 10-point policy agenda for the federal, state, and city government to enact policies that will directly help our city's restaurants and nightlife venues. So, for example, COVID sick pay, because restaurants are having to pay all of their employees to be out. And sometimes they've had to shut down because they don't have enough employees, yet they have to pay them. So there's no money coming into the business. How are they going to afford to pay employees, rightfully so, who need to be compensated while they're at home sick or at home in quarantine? We should get cash grants and subsidies to help offset the cost for our struggling small businesses. We should be getting rapid tests directly to restaurants, so workers don't have to take off hours and hours and stand on these long lines and then be home for a couple of days if they were exposed or if they have COVID. So getting tests directly to restaurants would provide a great convenience, and it would let businesses also enhance their operations, or at least better plan. I mentioned converting sales tax to grants, the propane heaters. The state can bring back alcohol to go, which earlier in the pandemic was allowed. Unfortunately, it expired because the governor lost their executive powers at the time to implement it. But that provided a great revenue stream to restaurants. You could order a margarita to get delivered with your tacos, or a glass of wine with your pasta you're getting delivered. So it wasn't only great and helpful to restaurants and workers because it increased the average check, meaning they get bigger tips, but it was so popular with the public. Bring that back. Federal government. Restaurant Revitalization Fund was a grant program. 65% of restaurants in New York that applied got shut out of it because the money was quickly exhausted. The federal government needs to replenish the Revitalization Fund. We're working with Senator Schumer and the New York congressional delegation to get it done, but it needs to get done now. Help pay back rent, help pay vendors, help pay workers, and all these other expenses that, frankly, so many restaurants can't afford or have so much debt on their shoulders from the past almost 2 years. So we got to think creatively, and we don't need to sit and debate about what these businesses need. We've spoken with them. We're telling our leaders in government, here are 10 ideas, just implement them.
I'm looking at number 10, get more people vaccinated and boosted. I mean, isn't that really the most important thing? You have your feet on the ground there. In terms of the restaurant industry, is it lagging behind? Is it where everybody else is? What's your thoughts on that?
No, unfortunately, I think we are, among the different types of businesses out there, having some of the most challenges because we are front and center public facing. So, while someone may go to a retail shop because they need to go buy something like a shirt, they're going and doing that, or they're ordering it online, where for the restaurants, maybe they're ordering food from home, but the check average is less. They're probably cooking more, going to the grocery store more. So restaurants definitely, I think, are lagging behind the rest of the economy. When you look at the jobs numbers too, I mean, right before this new increase in cases hit, we were still about 100,000 jobs short in our city's restaurants and bars compared to pre-pandemic employment levels. I'm afraid that's probably going to increase now because of, what's going on with COVID. So we're lagging behind. We need support, and we need to get through this together. And we need to do it in a smart way.
Final thoughts. I'm going to take you 6 months ahead, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where are we? What do you think?
Well, the one thing that I've been saying now for a while is the only thing that is certain during the life of COVID is that everything is uncertain. So I have no idea where we're going to be. What I can say is that hopefully we will get through this increase in cases and it'll start plateauing, going down maybe towards the end of January or so. But we need to learn to live with this. And I know that's very difficult to say and very difficult to do, but we're going to have to moderate and manage all of these different risks that we're taking and continue to live our life. So I'm hoping it'll be warmer weather. We'll see the variant, dissipate. We'll see people back excited, enthusiastic to go out and eat, drink, and socialize. We know when people feel like when people are isolated and away from their friends, away from their family, away from their jobs, when they can go back out and do it in a way that they feel is safe, they have a huge urge to do it. So my hope is that it'll be beautiful weather. COVID will be much less than where we are now, and people will be really excited to go out and eat, drink, and celebrate, spend some money, support their businesses. So that's the optimistic me. But again, who knows? But we just need to keep fighting forward.
Well, Andrew, great stuff as always. You're doing a great job. Maybe you come back in a couple of weeks, couple of months, and just give us a little bit of an update if you could.
Anytime, happy to do it. And hopefully we'll be talking about a better situation at that point.
Maybe we'll meet in person someday.
We'd love it. Over a meal.
Exactly. All right, stay with us. Today's Verdict has so much more right after this. Okay, welcome back to today's verdict. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesch. I've been looking forward to this guest for some time. Spencer Sheehan is an attorney, deals with class actions, products, cereal boxes, all the fun stuff that you would really want to discuss with an attorney. Spencer, how are you doing today?
Good. I'm doing well. Thank you. Good morning, David.
Good morning. So maybe we could just start and you could just tell the viewers what made you get into this type of law, to be honest.
Well, I was always the type of person who had a real passion about doing something when they were ripped off by just a small amount, the small amount that makes it unlikely for you to go and complain about it for the average person. Maybe you got a box of cereal that was only 60% full. Well, that's not really something that you're going to spend 8 hours of your day on or to advocate for change. And whether it's getting a refund for a subscription that wasn't canceled, these things always bothered me. And when I had to choose or take a direction in my life and in my career as a lawyer, this was where I turned. And here I am.
I had a friend of mine, happens to be a very wealthy friend. I remember walking into a store with him and he was complaining about the price of an apple. It was like 35 cents as opposed to 15 cents. And I once said, what's the big deal? It's an apple. He said, it's not the point. The point is they're overcharging for this and it shouldn't be that. And he got very angry about it. And I said, okay. And he could afford 1 million apples. But you're right. I think sometimes it's the principle and you have to hold people accountable. So I think it's a very noble thing that you're doing. So who are we holding responsible? Is it companies? Is it manufacturers? Give us a little synopsis.
Well, it's easy to say that we're holding big bad corporations, companies accountable that are taking advantage of people. However, much of the issues that I deal with are issues that I always say are best addressed through the regulatory structure of government. However, because of, system or the way of our society is structured, that is very weak. And the rules in place by the FDA and among the FTC and other agencies are often shaped by, the corporations and the way that they would want the laws to be, so that they don't have to provide us with what would be best for us.
All right, so you don't have to go to the glasses for a second. I had Chloe Kanan, she's a law student, do a little research for me. We're talking New York General Business Law, Article 22A, Sections 349 and 350. Do you use those particular sections when you're bringing these actions at all for deceptive practices, or are you looking at something else?
It's generally those state consumer protection statutes from New York, as you indicated, 349 and 350, that are the basis of a typical case. We throw in the other claims for warranties and whatnot, but it's generally the general business law. And as you know, the general business law has a statutory damages component, which supposedly that's some great equalizer. Whether it is or not, I
guess you disagree with that.
I have, academically, but I'd love to discuss that maybe with you another time instead of boring people about.
But let's talk about some of the elements, and this is where I thought the research was interesting. In terming about the misrepresentation as opposed to a mere scheme or marketing strategy, how are you able to differentiate between the two? How can you tell when, wait a second, this just does not smell this does not pass the smell test, or as opposed to, well, they're just trying to make a living, I'll let it slide. How do you make that determination, Spencer?
Well, I believe that the 349 and 350 deal with false representations of deceptive advertising. And any representation, whether or not it's singular on, let's say, one line of products, or whether it's pervasive across a whole line of products or services, then that is something which the general business law would sweep up. It was designed very broadly, I think, probably in the late 70s, I think, when many states enacted their consumer protection laws, to anticipate that there would be types of conduct that they had not thought of yet. So they wanted to make it as broad as possible to apply to everything. And, that's what it is.
I know this sounds a little nuts, but do you like walk up and down the supermarket aisle sometimes and take a look
That's
at
what people think.
things?
I hardly go to the supermarket. Actually, I never go. But people think that, a lot, but no, I don't.
But how does it come across listen, you have to realize or figure out at some point that there's a deceptive product. Do people come to you or do you go to them? Or
That's a very good question. I'll answer that honestly, which I don't know. Sometimes people use that against you. It can be very challenging for a typical person who works a 9-to-5 job to know how they are deceived. Now, some may say, well, if they don't know, what are they complaining about? Because to have understanding of the nuance of any particular area, you have to be well versed in it. You have to study it and know it in great detail. The average person isn't going to be able to tell me, oh, they're using a vanillin that was made by fermentation, which has this sort of unnatural. No. So while some things come to me from, I guess, what we would call insiders, it sounds sexier than it is. Some things come like that. Some things come from, people might, say, give me some knowledge about it, but, and this is as a class action attorney, we're often criticized for, they just make things up. But everything, no attorney, discovers things by themselves in a way. We work off of other, I guess, reports or information from society at large.
But I would think you'd have to know your science. I mean, you'd have to really understand, the difference between additives and vitamins and flavors.
Yes.
Am I correct?
That is correct. I have studied these areas in great detail. I don't know very much science. That's why I'm in the law. But yes, there is an incredible amount of information that I feel that I need to know in order to handle these types of cases.
Let's get back to the lawsuit itself. We're dealing with class action. Sometimes the viewers don't really understand the difference. Can you just explain to them very quickly how you certify a class, how how this works? Maybe a little brief overview.
That's a great question. Most people are familiar with class actions because if they're like anybody, they've gotten a postcard in the mail with really fine print that they've probably thrown out about a toaster oven they bought 3 years ago or something. And we've all gotten checks for like 35 cents in the mail. And then we get angry because the lawyer gets all the money. And we feel we should get it as consumers. But a class action is designed precisely for those instances where there is a harm that is much too small to remedy on an individual basis. And the goals are not always, or not completely to compensate the individuals for their loss. But if it is, it tries to, although because the losses are quite small. And to certify a class, you need to show that the representation or action is something that's common, meaning it has to be something that affects a lot of people. If one supermarket has a sign up that says 50% off all items, and then it's hard to then apply that to every other supermarket within that chain. So it has to be something broad, and marketing practices are in that category.
I can't keep you too much longer, but are you working on anything particularly?
I am working on several things that are interesting. Whether or not I could share it, it's not that it's a secret. I just have to, look through my email or even just look around my office and I'll see. I have some, some standard stuff, some Slack-filled things which are not really the greatest cases, and some other types of cases and all sorts of things. And I have some more non-food, of which in the new year I will make it a resolution to do.
Is there any particular cases that you're very proud of that you've been able to be successful in and maybe even change the food industry?
Well, changing any industry is something I am, I guess, knowledgeable enough to know that it's not possible. People think you could change things, but I know that that's not possible. And so why I do it, but that's a different story. But at least in one instance, we have a case against A&W, Keurig Dr. Pepper. then they have root beer and cream soda, A&W brand, which everybody knows. If you've gotten
I
to
love A&W.
we all do. Remember from bowling parties as a kid, root beer and cream soda, the staple.
A&W root beer makes that frosty something taste. I forgot the
It tastes
jingle.
great. Yeah, it has like the frost. Yeah, with that cold mug with like it's delicious. Yes, and for years, I don't know for how long, at least a decade, they had been marketing their root beer and cream soda as made with aged vanilla, and they have a big mug on their products that says made with aged vanilla, and it's stenciled in this sort of old-fashioned way, like you would like in a shop or something. And turns out, yes, that's right. Turns out they were, maybe putting essentially a drop of vanilla in a sea of ethyl vanillin, which is the synthetic replacement for vanilla. So while it may have been technically true, although, in the most literal sense, it does have some vanilla, it was mostly flavored by artificial ethyl vanillin. Now, the reason I mentioned it is because since our lawsuit was filed in 2019, they have removed this from their product. However, I still see it in the marketplace, but that's mostly due to the closeout of various label stocks.
All right, well, Spencer, we're going to leave it there. This was extremely enlightening for me, and we'd love you to come back.
I would love to, and thank you for having me, and I hope you have a happy holidays, happy new year, and stay safe.
Today's Verdict coming back with so much more right after this. Well, that's all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us, and of course, you, the viewers, for watching. If you have an issue or a topic that you'd like to see on a future Today's Verdict, just email me at davidlesch@bronxit.org. Until the next time, do your research, reach a verdict. See you in 2 weeks.